Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode. I'm Dr. Suchitra, known as the Divorce Doctor, and I'm delighted to welcome you here to talk to Vicky Townsend, who is joining us all the way from the US. Just to give a little background on what we're talking about today, you may not be aware, but 95% of all marriages in India are still very much arranged marriages. The statistics on divorce regularly shows that India has one of the lowest at 1% of divorce rates in the whole world. My perspective is that this low rate isn't so much the fact that we have all happy marriages, but about the fact that it is so difficult to leave a toxic, abusive, or unhappy marriage. However, it is also important to remember that human beings who have divorce are also workers in the corporate sector or in other professional lives. And we are here to have an amazing conversation with someone who has deep insights and a mission to talk about these issues. So, with that, I would like to welcome Vicky. Vicky, welcome to this podcast. It is so
Thank
wonderful to have you here.
Oh, so such an honor. It's so exciting that we can do this across, from around the world. I literally am on the other side of the world and we're doing this right now. It's so exciting for me. Thank you
Absolutely.
for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Thank you so much for joining me. And I think what you said, we are on opposite sides of the world, but the issue is of such universal importance.
It
And
is.
it goes so deep into our very profound and inner personal lives that I think it's very, very important for us to have this conversation from every angle possible. And I think the angle that you bring to it is one which is fairly unique because a lot of people talk about legal, financial, emotional, even spiritual. But I think it's going to be very exciting to unpack what is it that you are on a mission to do. So, if I could invite you to just introduce yourself to our listeners, and then we'll get started.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, my name is Vicky Townsend. I'm the president and founder of Divorce Right. I was the CEO and founder of the National Association of Divorce Professionals here. And it has always been my mission to make this labyrinthine, complicated system kinder and gentler and easier for families to go through because it really, I have a saying, it says divorce doesn't destroy people. It's the way we divorce that destroys people. So I'm on a mission I'd love to change the system, but I know that I'm only one person. So what I want to do is support people going through it, help them with finding easier, less toxic ways to get through it, and support them after their life is, they're looking at a new and different life. It can be very scary. It can be very overwhelming. And we all need support to go through it. And I know, you're a champion because you went through it and it wasn't easy. And I'm not saying it should be easy as well, but it shouldn't cost you your life savings. It shouldn't cost you your emotional and mental well-being, because ultimately what we're doing is we're ending a relationship that no longer works. It doesn't serve us. And I don't believe that any higher power, however you want to say it, feels that you should be in something that is destroying you. So that's my mission.
Wow, that is so powerful. And thank you so much, Vicky, for sharing that. I think what you said a while ago was very profound, where you said that, it's not divorce that destroys people, it's the way we go about it. And I think this reminds me very much of what my mentor, Catherine Woodward Thomas, also teaches in her program, Conscious Uncoupling. That if it's even the words, divorce is seen as such a almost a violent rupturing of a relationship, and there are some words in the local language here in India which are almost like, explosive separation of two people, which is why I always found the word conscious uncoupling to be such a gentle and such a meaningful way of separating. But that's at a very deeply personal level. I think what you are talking about are those larger systemic structures,
Mhm.
which, as you said, kind of just poison the whole process and ruin people's lives. And there is no reason why people should not be able to live happily even after a divorce. And that's kind of my mission, to make sure that, as you said, one doesn't want divorce to be seen as easy. In the sense, marriages and deep intimate relationships are definitely worth the work that is required
Right.
sometimes. but no one deserves to be trapped in a toxic, abusive, or violent marriage. And for those women, definitely divorce should be seen as a solution and not as a problem. And I'm so glad that we are aligned on this issue here. So I just wanted to ask you, what is your perspective about corporates or professionals, and what are the problems that can arise as a result of people going through divorce? Because from what I recall, US has fairly high rate of divorce, almost over 40% at this point. So one would
Yes.
imagine that a lot of professionals are divorced or going through a divorce. And how do you think that affects people's professional lives?
Well, it impacts their professional life in a very drastic way that and it hasn't really been addressed because it's uncomfortable, right? This is your personal life. This and also there's so many religious connotations to it that in the corporate setting, it's been uncomfortable to talk about. It's their problem, right? It's over there. But here's what it does. And there was a study by a company called Family Innovations. It's done over a decade ago. So if we can ramp this up for inflation, that divorce here in the United States costs our corporations and our government agencies at the time over $300 billion a year. 300
Wow.
billion US dollars a year in government services, but more importantly, and to companies out there, to companies' bottom line. And how that shows up, you know, we talk about, there are a lot of things out there that take away productivity.
Mhm.
But what divorce does is it reduces productivity by about 40%. Personnel Psychology did a study. This also in Family Innovations had the same study that an employee going through a divorce loses about 40% of their productivity for 3 to 5 years.
Oh,
Why?
wow.
Because this labyrinthine system that they don't know how to get through, right? It impacts, it's not just legal stuff. And even if it's legal stuff, it's houses, it's wills and estates. Here in the United States, 1 out of every 4 divorces here involves criminal law. There's tax law, will and estate planning. There's all sorts of that kind of stuff, but it also impacts your finances, how you're going to live the rest of your life. It also impacts your children. It impacts where you're going to live, how you're going to live, and your mental health with depression, anxiety, and grief. Um, so there's this bigger impact that people are not aware of, and that lack of productivity comes in the form of absences. When you go through here in the United States, we have a saying of you better lawyer up,
Mm.
right? Better lawyer up. And in the divorce process, that those words put up walls and barriers instantly
Right.
that stops that couple from being able to communicate effectively
Mhm.
or kindly, and just sets this in
Right.
motion,
Right.
right? So I want to, here in the United States, and I don't know how it is in India, but we have 5 different ways to divorce here
Mhm.
in this
Okay.
country. Not all of them involve lawyers. As
Right.
a matter of fact, the 2 easiest, kindest, and gentlest ways you can go through it don't. And so I am on a mission to stop. So that productivity loss comes from absences, mandatory meetings with judges in a judge's chambers,
Right.
your meetings with your attorneys and your financial advisors, and all of that support staff that has to
Mhm.
get you through. And nobody in this country is incentivized to get it done quickly. As a
Right.
matter of fact, in this country, there is an incentive to keep it going.
And why is that? Do
Billable
you think?
hours, billable hours,
Right.
right?
Right.
There's money to be made in conflict and chaos,
I think
right?
it's the same world over, right? There's always profit in war.
Right,
And it's
right,
unfortunate when the war is inside your own home, there's still someone
exactly.
who's profiting from
And
it.
and it's even worse when the professionals that you hire will stir that up,
Wow.
right? To or create problems where there were none.
Right.
And or kind of take the long way to get through a problem, right?
Good.
And usually there's a simple way. And it starts with communication. So getting back to that productivity, absences is one,
Mhm.
right? Distractions is another. You have to send evidence. You have to send documentation. There's phone calls to your to your attorney. Here in the United States, the divorce industry is a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 job. I mean, it's industry.
Right.
That's when the courts are open. That's when your attorney's available. That's when your financial advisor is available. So it's going to impact work. So there's going to be calls, like I said, sending documentation, filling out paperwork, things like that that's going to have to be done during work. There's also something here, and I don't know if this is something that's being addressed in India, but there's something called presenteeism here.
Mhm.
And maybe you've seen it. That's what we call it. I don't know if you've called it, but you're physically at work, but you're like this.
Checked out. Yeah,
Right? Because you are worried about everything. In
absolutely.
this process, everything. Your children, are you going to have custody? Are you going to lose custody? Are you going to be able to maintain your home? Are you going to have to move? Who's going to take care of the kids? All of that is weighing on you all the time. And then another area that people don't seem to recognize is that here in the United States, 10% of divorcing employees quit.
Oh, is
The
that
number
so?
one reason that they quit,
Uh-huh.
yeah, that's a big number.
Yeah.
And I mean, the number one reason that they quit is because they never felt supported at work.
Okay.
Right. So, I here, leave that stuff at home, leave your divorce at home.
Yeah.
Well, you can't because it's a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5
Right.
industry.
Right.
Right. So it's really hard to not have to deal with those
Right.
things. And of
Right.
course, childcare comes into that and, everything else that's a part of that
Right.
process.
So, if I could just ask you a follow-up question to that, how are workplaces handling this, or how can they be more supportive? Is there something that's already in play? Is there something you recommend? Because, I mean,
Well,
as you
what
said,
we're doing,
all
yes,
the issues that you mentioned, they're very universal. I think anybody going through a divorce anywhere, and just to, add to what you were saying, is that divorce is actually like a death, but we don't see it that way because it's the death of a relationship, and a person has to go through the grief cycle. We do exactly
yes,
what you said. Oh, just get on with it. Forget him. He was bad
right,
bad for you. Just move on,
exactly.
to the next phase. But you can't, because you built an intimate relationship with someone, even if that person has been abusive. So to expect someone to come to work like a robot, I
Right.
think is something unacceptable. So how do you think workplaces are trying to support their employees?
Well, here in the United States, a lot of companies offer something they're called EAPs,
Mhm.
employee assistant plans or employee assistant programs. And here in the United States, there's typically some mental health counseling that's involved there, where they can have 3 sessions with a therapist, 6 sessions, 9 sessions, which is really insufficient
Mhm.
for the heartache and the emotional issues of grief and depression and anxiety and all of those things that comes along with divorce. But it's also insufficient in helping someone navigate all of the systems and processes that we have, because it's not divorce is not just a legal crisis.
Of
It's
course.
not even just a mental health crisis. It is a
Whole
full blown
package.
life crisis.
It is.
It is a life crisis. So, helping them deal with the mental health issues of why we got where we are, or the depression that I feel it's so important. Mental health and this support is very important, but it doesn't help them navigate the process. And here in our country, we offer at times either discounted legal services or prepaid legal services. And the saddest part about that for me is that it gives them one option:
Hmm.
litigation,
Right.
lawyer. It,
Right.
it it instantly throws them into that process. And when you have something that's either prepaid for or a discounted price.
Incentivized in some way.
It's
Yeah.
what you do.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just what you do. And also here in the United States, that lawyering up is the brand of divorce here in this country. That's
Right.
just what
Right.
people do.
Right.
Um, so there are so many other ways to do this where you don't have to destroy, each other,
Mm-hmm.
your children, your family. And I believe, and I will die on this hill, that a family should not lose their life savings and their mental sanity to end a relationship that is not working, that's toxic, that's abusive, or whatever, for
Absolutely.
whatever reason. It's not my business, it's yours, right? As long as we know that this is not working for either one of you, um, let's help you get through the process in a kinder and gentler way so that
Yeah.
both of you can move on into another life and find joy and happiness,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
That's ultimately, right?
Absolutely. So, Vicky, I have often, of course, because of my own personal experience and then now working with a lot of women who are going through divorce, I've kind of ruminated on this. And I'm amazed at how much marriages are celebrated and how much divorces are shamed,
Right.
or made difficult. And eventually it all comes down to a very feminist kind of perspective, that who actually benefits from being married and who benefits from being divorced. And many studies that I have read say that men actually benefit from marriage and women benefit when they are independent and on their own. So it kind of feels like there's a bedrock of patriarchal socio-cultural construct. And as
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned a couple of times, with the kind of religious belief amplification.
Yeah.
And I think the whole thing is kind of topped off by economic considerations, because you called it the divorce industry, and you
Yeah.
yourself you yourself are a part of it. So
Right.
can you tell us a little bit about when you realized that this was your mission, or you wanted to break out from what is the norm?
Well, I've been through it now more than once,
Mhm.
and I'm a pretty smart girl. And despite that, I still made bad decisions.
Right.
I made a lot of decisions to get out of pain,
Mm,
right? I was willing to do a lot of things to get out of pain.
right.
And I also, when you're going through this process, when somebody says, I want a divorce, or I'm leaving you, or you're leaving them, whatever, however it works out, your brain is flooded with that stress hormone cortisol.
Yeah.
And when that happens to you and it gets in the nooks and crannies of your brain and your prefrontal cortex, I mean, there's a physical reason for it, that you cannot make good decisions. And you'll hear people talk about, I was just in this fog.
Mm,
I was in a fog. Well, that fog is cortisol,
yeah.
right? That it's just stress at
And you can have long-term
magnified.
consequences, right? I mean,
Yes, it
you
does
can have,
on our
yeah,
health
yeah,
too.
absolutely. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And one of the other issues with, in the corporate sector is that, stress reduces our immune system's
Mm,
ability to respond
yeah,
to illness,
yeah.
and there's more sick days.
Mm,
There's also some studies here that, we're talking about how it's a financially more difficult process for women. Here in the United States, it's the number one reason that single mothers fall into poverty.
very unfortunate. It's
It
extremely
is.
unfortunate. Yeah.
It
And
is.
that's another conversation that I've been following on Instagram and some other social media platforms, is about how the single mother as a phrase has been kind of vilified. Oh, she's a single mom,
Mm.
because they often are living in poverty, or less financially well off than they were, standard of living. But there isn't that much conversation about the fathers who either didn't get custody or didn't want custody, or are not supporting with childcare adequately. So, is this something that you think corporates or workplaces can help support by improving childcare facilities, or offering some
Absolutely.
kind of support to the single mothers?
Absolutely. Well, so one of the things uh, that we talked about, 10% of divorcing employees quit.
Hmm.
The first reason was that they didn't feel supported at work.
Right.
The second reason is that they couldn't find affordable housing. Now that remember, they're a single
Of course.
person now versus two incomes. So they couldn't find affordable housing near work. And the third reason is they can't find affordable childcare.
Right.
So supporting um, a, uh, uh, a single mother, single fathers too. I mean, anybody with either a stipend for childcare
Mhm.
or at some of the larger companies now here in the United States actually have childcare on the campus of their workplace. And that's really important for a lot of reasons, particularly because when a woman finds that she's going to be the sole caretaker oftentimes of her children, she might go back to mom because that's the option she has. So as a company that doesn't want to lose their good employees, supporting them with childcare options is a smart business choice.
Absolutely.